Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhakaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam devotees. Shri Guru and Gauranga. So I'm continuing with questions and answers. I did not get really backed up over the holiday per se. There are a couple of questions which I'm kind of reserving because I've either answered them personally to some degree, or it's a topic, as I've mentioned before, that I've already done, I've already given some expression to, and I don't want to be redundant and start just making several of these things on the same exact topic. Sometimes someone may want to have a particular topic unpacked or something, and I can do that in short form, answering the question on Messenger or email. I don't have to make a whole separate video on it. So this particular question, which was a question that's come up before, but I don't think I've ever done a kind of presentation on it, and I don't see it as something that requires a lengthy presentation, so I thought I would do that this morning. The question pretty much dealt with, I'm paraphrasing here because again all these questions are always formatted really long, is why there's so many various narrations or so many various, what is this word here? It's hard to even see. I think he typed two words together here. Oh, why there's so many variations, not narrate, variations on the theme of the jiva's origin. Some people say that the jiva's origin is in the spiritual world. I know you've dealt with that before, but I've also heard others say that actually the jivas come from Brahman. And so are there any thoughts on this? Plus, are there other narratives? I've heard some, have you? All right, so that was the question. A lot of times I just paraphrase these questions, but I thought this was rather short, so I would read it. But essentially, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I missed one part. It's all down here. Oh, as far as the jivas coming from Brahman, wasn't that said by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? Okay. So, basically, the various narrations that are spoken about the jiva, in many cases, are ontology. So ontology is the study of the nature of something, and it is not a historical description. So I think I've spoken on that before. For instance, in the Paramatma Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami Pad has given exhaustively an ontological explanation of Jiva Tattva. So here, Jiva Goswami is not describing the history of the jiva, he's describing an ontology of how to understand the nature of the jiva. Similarly, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the 15th chapter and into the 16th chapter of Jiva Dharma has also given an ontology of the jiva. So, if you look closely, especially in the 15th chapter of Jiva Dharma, the question that is the genesis of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's answers was not Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying these are being answered by Premdas Babaji. So in the narration of Jiva Dharma, Premdas Babaji is answering the question of Brajanath about the nature of what it is to be Tatashta Swabhav. So Tatashta Swabhav means having the nature of being situated between the spiritual and the material energy. So in answering that question, the first thing that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has done, and other acharyas have also done, is give a description of what is tata and then sta. The word sta simply means to be situated, but tata means a imperceptible line of demarcation between two things. The example given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is land and water. So this imperceptible line of demarcation between the land and the water is called the tata. And to be situated in that position is called sta, so tatasta. So also, tatasta is a common parlance for the jiva shakti, the energy of Bhagavan, which is his jiva shakti. They are called tatashta jivas. And this is references given by Srila Jiva Goswami all the way through all of our acharyas. They've also used this term, tatashta jivas or tatashta shakti, etc., etc. So, when they are giving descriptions regarding the nature of tatashta swabhav, they're speaking ontologically, not historically. So, in order to sometimes try to accommodate the ontology, or not really maybe seeing it as ontological, there have been some devotees who have taken a narrative given by our acharyas to kind of encompass that ontology and taken it as a literal history. I'm giving a prime example. Our Srila Prabhupada magnificently, with so much ingenuity, gave expression to theological concepts in Vaishnavism that, you know, if you had to think about taking up the task of doing that, expressing certain concepts in English to an English-speaking audience, not just translating the words into English, but couching it in such a way that it would be digestible for the English mindset, you can't say anything else but Krishna Shakti Vinanaye Tava Pavartan, which Srila Prabhupada quotes over 50 times in his books. That unless one is specifically empowered by Krishna to do this, it would not be possible. Because there's just so many nuances in Vaishnava theology that you could not make an adequate, comprehensive translation of the concept, even if you were able to, you know, translate the words into English. But our Srila Prabhupada miraculously was able to do that. So, for instance, Srila Prabhupada gave one narrative. That narrative was that the jivas who are conditioned, at one time, they actually did have a relationship with Krishna. And having been inattentive or envious, and so many other words have been used, so many other adjectives have been used to try to describe it, because of whatever that was, the jivas then deviated from the natural mood of serving Krishna, and they found themselves in the material world under which they were going suffering. And so now, having understood that this material world is suffering, one should revive the original consciousness of service to God and go back home, back to Godhead. So of course, originally the term back home, back to Godhead was something that Srila Prabhupada had taken from the Archbishop of Canterbury, and it was more of a sociological statement about the godlessness of society and the need to turn society back towards God. But later on, and Srila Prabhupada did not interrupt the flow of how that statement then became part of a sort of tag on our theology about developing Krishna consciousness of going back home, back to Godhead. So though he did not originally coin the phrase or take the phrase as a means of expressing an original fall and then going back home, back to Godhead, it kind of fit the mold of a certain narrative. So now, let's look at the narrative that Srila Prabhupada gave and kind of understand it. A deep ontological conception was expressed in that narrative that was able to be digested, especially in the Western world, where our religious leanings were mostly Judeo-Christian, and the idea of an original sin and repentance was quite instilled in the religious mindset in the Western world. Whether it is in Islam, whether it is in Christianity or in Judaism, the idea of an original sin and repentance and being revived in a relationship with God is throughout the whole thread of the basic Judeo-Christian model. So for us to accept that idea, of having been with Krishna, fallen, and then reviving a relationship that made natural and common sense to almost everybody who heard it. Now, the question was there actual historical reality to that or not? And Srila Prabhupada very clearly in the 7th canto, maybe it's chapter 1, text 35, something like that, he clearly says, in order to dispel the idea that this is a Siddhantic part of Gaudiya theology, he expresses clearly that unless there is something to be done on behalf of the Lord, then no one can fall from Vaikuntha. In other words, he then establishes clearly Siddhantically that you cannot fall from the spiritual world in a relationship with Krishna. First of all, the spiritual world is completely void, right, of any kind of illusory energy. Also, in the spiritual world, once there's a relationship with Krishna, it's described by Rupa Goswami, Savata Dongsaraitam Yadapi Dongsakarane, that relationship cannot be broken under any circumstances, even if there is a cause. Rather, Yad Bhava Bandhano Yuno Prema Parikirtita, the nature of praying is that it makes the love stronger. So, there is no context, there is no Siddhantic arrangement under which we could rationalize that we fell from the spiritual world. But as an ontological conception to explain the constitutional nature of being the servant of Krishna, it was a perfect narrative. Digestible to those who had the mindset of this in their religious experience, even if they weren't currently practicing it, they had this idea, so it completely could resonate immediately. The only difference now being that God is personal, that the abode of God is a place of personalism. So Srila Prabhupada simultaneously was wiping away the sort of impersonal idea of God whom nobody really sees, knows, etc. And nobody has any idea where he exists, etc. But now some specificity was given to the fact that God is Krishna, the personality of Godhead, and he has his abode of Vrindavan, etc., etc. So now a sort of personalized understanding along with something that was easily digestible based on our previous religious experiences was ontologically presented by Srila Prabhupada, and hence so many thousands of people were able to come under the shelter of Srila Prabhupada, easily accept that, and then move forward progressively in bhakti. Now, Srila Prabhupada never declared that this was a history. He presented it, and it was strictly a ontological presentation, basically with a narrative about the nature of being a Tatashta jiva, who has a constitutional relationship with God. Jivera Sarupoye Krishnera Nityadas. The fact that you're the Das of Krishna, that can't be removed under any circumstances. It does not matter whether you're conditioned, not conditioned, liberated. Everyone is the Das of Krishna. Dasabhuti Harieva Nanyasha Eva Kadachana. Srila Baladev Vijabhushan Prabhu has quoted this in his Govinda Bhashya. Right? So you cannot not be the Das of Krishna. You may not know it or may not realize it, but that doesn't change the constitutional fact. Much in the same way I gave an example the other day, that if any lady will give birth to a child, there is a constitutional biological relationship between that mother and child. If that child is taken at the time of birth and raised by someone else, it does not erase the reality of the biological or constitutional nature of the parent-child relationship with the original mother. So it does not matter what that child perceives in their growing up. No, these are my parents, this is where I live. Originally and constitutionally, they're the biological child of that mother who gave birth. In the same way, we're always Das of Krishna. It does not matter what our condition in life is. Right? So Srila Prabhupada, to establish that constitutionality of that relationship, he spoke this narrative in a way that ontologically gave credence to that reality that we're constitutionally the Das of Krishna. At the same time, it was something we could resonate with by our previous religious experience. In the same way, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in the 15th chapter of Jiva Dharma, he goes through several examples taken especially from Ved Sastra. Because Brajanath asked, after Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has quoted one of the verses of Das Mul, he asked that please, you'll give me any Vedic reference for this. So then he quotes from the Brihad Aranyapya Upanishad. I think it's in the 4th chapter of that Brihad Aranyapya Upanishad. So many verses which are examples of the nature of being Tatashta. One example, there's a huge fish in a lake that swims from one bank to another. Later, narratives develop that the jivas, they look from one side of Brahman and look and see the spiritual side. Then they look at the material side, and then a choice is made, right? Because also there's the need to accommodate the idea of free will. So this narrative is given. So in this way, though Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself, if you read carefully in Jiva Dharma, in the 15th chapter, after explaining all of these things, then Brajanath asks a very interesting question. Listen, if the jivas are in fact eternal, then what is the question of their genesis in some way? When you use words like manifest or etc., how do we understand that if they're eternal? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, quoting Premdas Babaji, says, oh, listen, the nature of Prakat Bhashya, means material language, is such that it cannot free itself from the influence of time, past, present, and future. So anything that we say using material language will inevitably involve the use of ideas of manifested, created, etc., because this is part of the experience of the Tatashta Jiva, for one, and secondly, it's built into the language of the material world. But he says you should know that all Vaishnavas Siddhantically conclude that the jiva is eternal and exists in one of two states. So there isn't a third state like being situated in a holding pattern in Brahman until you get a chance to look either way and then come to the world. So in the same way I explained the narrative given by Al Srila Prabhupada to give birth to a conceptual part of our theology, the eternality of the constitutional relation with Krishna, our acharyas have also given narratives that indicate an idea of the use of free will by looking to one side or another and then coming to the material world. My own Guru Pada Padma has given the example of mustard seeds falling on the edge of a knife. Some fall this way, some fall that way. You understand? So all of these narratives are only to give an indication, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself expresses in the latter part of that 15th chapter. I've spoken all of these things simply to give an indication, right, about the nature of the Tatashta Swabhava. How will you clearly understand it? Oh, if you will do sadhan bhajan, it will come up in your chit samadhi. In your internal realizations, as you do bhajan, this siddhantic reality will become very clear. Now the idea becomes, well, wait a minute, that, that starts to get a little vague. Of course, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's absolute, that in your unfoldment in bhakti, you will come to a point where the realizations become crystallized in your maturation. But there should be some sastric basis for anything, right? So, first of all, let's go back one second. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said the jivas are eternal and exist in one of two states. One state is Nitya Siddha, means eternally accomplished jivas who live eternally in the spiritual world, who never have any dealings with the external energy or mind. The others are Anadibhada. The word Anadi has been used by Jiva Goswami, it's been used throughout all sastras, right? And the word Anadi literally means without any beginning, right? So Al Srila Prabhupada also allowed the use of the word time immemorial, right? Meaning beyond your capacity to remember. But in this way, it also had some theological implication. What implication? That if a person was to think that I was placed in the material world without any, first of all, opportunity for an alternative, secondly, from beginningless time, right? Because of the nature of self-interest in the jiva, there would be some kind of mental conflict with that. Because until you come to a point of being surrendered to the will of Krishna, no one will digest easily. Yes, just from the time without a beginning, I was placed in the material world, but I heard there were other people in the spiritual world. Why didn't I go there? You understand? So there's not, first of all, a clear understanding that the entire creation, whether it is material or spiritual, belongs to Krishna. Everything, material and spiritual, is all part of Bhagavan's energy. Secondly, Krishna performs pastimes in both places. So because Krishna performs pastimes, Ananta Vaikuntha in the unlimited Vaikuntha planets, meaning also Golok Vrindavan, and Brahmananda, he performs Srishti Leela and so many pastimes for which he descends into the Brahmanandas of the material world. Then from Krishna's perspective, everything belongs to Krishna. Therefore, the jiva's self-interest is the only obfuscating factor in being able to understand that being an Anadi Bhata jiva is not some kind of partiality or some kind of prejudice on behalf of the divine arrangement. Because Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the 16th chapter of Jiva Dharma then answers this question, the kind of question that's posed, well, listen, why did I have to come here and why did I have to suffer? So first of all, I don't want to get way off our track, but for one thing, where is the suffering? The suffering is actually not in the Atma of the Jiva. The Jiva's Atma is not what's suffering. Jiva Goswami Pad is clearly mentioned in Paramatma Sandarbha, Chid Ananda Atmakam. And in quoting this section, one of the 21 qualities, ontologically speaking, of the Jiva, he comments that the word Chit Ananda Atmaka means Dukkha Pratiyogita. So Pratiyogi is a term that comes from Nyaya, and it means something that's the antithesis of something else. So the soul, its opposite feature is suffering. So there is no dukkha, there is no misery in the Atma itself. So where does the misery come from? It comes from the vicarious identification with the external energy. So the external energy is a bona fide real energy of Bhagavan. The jiva is also bona fide energy of Bhagavan. But the idea of these two things coming together is like oil and water. They don't mix, and the conceptions derived from their connection is illusory, and it gives rise to a duality of happiness and distress, or sukha and dukkha. You understand? So actually, there was never any suffering of the Atma itself. If you have a nightmare, you have a bad dream, and you wake up, who will we blame for the nightmare? You yourself, the Atma, did not suffer. Even the physical body was not there and being eaten by the tiger or burned in the fire or whatever the nightmare was, right? It was something that took place on a platform, subtle platform. I'm not going into what is dreams and all that, but it took place, for long story short, not in the actual conscious experience of the jiva. It was a dream. In the same way, the vicarious identification of the jiva with the material energy creates, even Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes it, a dreamlike state, right? And in that, the jiva experiences a duality of happiness and distress. This is one of the 5 features of avidya, or ignorance. Avidya means avidya, the absence of knowledge of our essential nature. Srila Jiva Goswami Pad in Paramatma Sandarbha, he quotes that, Api anadi paramatatva jnanam samsarga abhava. So the word samsarga abhav means there's been an abhav. In this case, prag abhav means a prior non-existence of paratattva jnana, means knowledge of the soul, relationship with Bhagavan, etc., in the jiva from anadikal. Right? Because of the absence of that knowledge, then, because the jiva is actually something, then the avidya shakti, the illusory energy, presents asmita. Oh, okay, asmi means I am somebody. So, asmi, who are you? Ahamkar. So that identity is now covered by ahamkar. Ahamkar literally means aham, I am the karana and karta of everything that's in my experience. Right? So this is called ahamkara. And of course, in dealing with the three modes of material nature, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna clearly says, Prakriti kriya monani gunai karmani sarvasya ahamkara vimudatma kartam iti manyate. So ahamkara vimudatma means this is a bewilderment. This is part of the avidya shakti. That ahamkara is telling you you're the doer, but you're not. You're vicariously looking on the TV screen of the chitta, and the three modes of material nature are playing a drama, and you're inserting yourself vicariously in that drama by your karmic portfolio in the same way you sit and watch a movie and become invested in the characters of that movie and go through the emotional roller coaster of the plot. So there was never really any suffering for the Atma itself. It is a vicarious experience. Much in the same way as I just described, watching a movie, you're not there. The movie itself even is not real, right? But we identify with the plot and become emotionally invested and up and down with the plot of the movie, right? So that also gives rise to a duality because the very nature of the Atma is free from any misery. So now a duality is present where there is sometimes happiness, sometimes distress. This is called rag and dvesh. These are two features also of the five of avidya. So you have avidya itself, asmita, false identity, then rag and dvesh. So now you have four things. The fifth thing is called abhinivesh. And abhinivesh means an inextricable energy built into Maya Shakti, which does not allow the jiva to extricate themselves from it on their own energy, their own power. Right? So now this takes us to a very important verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, which then explains why the descriptions of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur were ontological in nature, not historical. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is our Mool Sastra, the root scripture, right? All our Goswami's Granthas are all written on the basis of Srimad Bhagavatam. All the verses of the Sandarbhas are based on Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the 11th canto, 22nd chapter, 10th verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is clearly mentioned there. Anadi avidya yuktasya purushasya veda atmanam swato na sambhavanti anya ganatva ganadobhave. So here it's mentioning the jiva's yukta connection with avidya is anadi. There was no beginning to it. The very meaning of anadi means something that has no beginning, but it does have an end. Right? So this completely theologically lines up with what was mentioned by Baladeva Vijayabhushan, right? Dasabhuti Hariyeva Nanyasha Eva Kadachana. At no time can you be something other than the Das of Krishna in reality. So there can't be any perpetual or eternal manifestation of being in the material world. Because your nature at some point, by good fortune, Yarichaya, I'm not explaining that here, will come about. Right? But the sojourn in the material world is in fact anadi. Now, how does this sojourn in the material world become broken? So, by some good fortune, all of these sastras, Madhurya Kandamini especially, is mentioned by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Pad, Yadvichaya Matkattado. At the time, Yadvichaya is the word that's primary here. The word Yadvichaya has been commented on by everybody. Adi Sridhar Swami, meaning in Bhavarta Deepika, the original commentation on Srimad Bhagavatam, he mentioned Yadvichaya means Atibhagyena, who was extremely fortunate. They will come in contact via Bhakti Mukhi Sukritis with any sadhu. By the influence of that sadhu, the beginning of their sojourn in spiritual life will begin, and the breaking of the influence of abhinavesh, of avidya, is broken. Similarly, a similar statement is expressed in Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Brahmanya Brahmati Kon Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Bhoy Bhakti Latavij. By Guru Krishna Prasad, right? Then the Bhakti Lata Bij is given to any fortunate soul who's been wandering throughout the creation from Anadikal. What is that Bij and what is that Lata? That Bij is described. Sarva Sangamena Ratnya Ankor Upa Rupa Eva Mati. Right? So the Ankor means the sprout of praying. The Bij that creates that route, that Lata, is called mati. Bij means a seed. The seed that creates that bhakti lata is called mati. What is mati? Mati means when discrimination comes in any jiva and they ask the questions that were asked by Sanatana Goswami to Mahaprabhu. Ke ami, ke amai, jarita patrai. Who am I and why am I suffering? Then Mahaprabhu gives the synopsis answers. Jivera Supoya Krishna Nityadas, Jivera Tatashta Shakti Beira Be Prakash. Right? You're actually constitutionally the Das of Krishna, but you're suffering because of being in Tatashta Swabhav. Being void of Sarup Shakti or the internal energy, the jivas identify because of a lack of spiritual power. They identify with the modes of material nature, and therefore they have the experiences I described previously. Right? So here, the fact that the jivas are anadi in their sojourn in the material world has been established in Srimad Bhagavatam. How will they get out of it? I was describing that process. That same verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Swato na sambhavanti. By your own effort, you cannot break this abhinivesh. Anya, it requires another person. Who? Gyanatva gyanado bhavet. So here, Gyanatva means somebody who has realized Swarup Shakti, who's realized soul. And that person is by Karun Shakti or by mercy inclined to give that to you. You understand? So, therefore, in the verse, Brahmanya Brahmati Kona Bhagwan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhakti Latavij, then Guru Krishna Prasad is mentioned. So what is that Guru Krishna Prasad? In Madhurya Kandambini, this is unpacked. It means that Bhagavan himself, Sri Krishna, does not give bhakti. Because Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, if Krishna is the dispenser of bhakti, then everybody should automatically have it. If not, then the fault called asamya dosh. Asamya means partiality. The fault of partiality would be attributed to Krishna. Because you gave one person bhakti, didn't give somebody else bhakti. You understand? Similarly, those who are Uttam Bhagavats, it means they're absolutely pure Vaishnavas who are absorbed within the spiritual energy 24 hours a day, etc. Right? They also don't give bhakti. Why? One may get the influence of bhakti by seeing their persona, but they don't give bhakti. Why? Because Sarvabhutam Yapa said, Bhagavan Bhavam Atmanaha. They see everybody serving Krishna. So they don't make any distinction. Oh, this one is in Maya, this person's not in Maya. So they also don't distribute bhakti. Who distributes bhakti? Any Uttam Bhagavat Vaishnava will come to the platform of Madhyam Bhagavat. Or those who are rising up to the platform of Madhyam Adhikar and can reflect the mood of Uttam Bhagavats in their heart by their own practice. They are the dispensers of bhakti. And this is described in Madhurya Kandambini, Paramasvatantra Bhagavat Bhakta, Jata Kripa Mangaludhai. That the rising of Mangala Kripa, the auspicious mercy, comes through that Paramasvatantra Bhagavat Bhakta. Means, Paramasvatantrata means they've been deputed or empowered by Krishna, that their independence allows them to not be dependent on Krishna to whom they give bhakti. So now how do we rationalize that? Because we just mentioned Uttam Bhagavats, they see everybody serving Krishna. So if they started trying to dispense bhakti, it also would be attributed with the fault of asamya dosh, or partiality. So how do we understand this? Jiva Goswami Pad says, they come to the platform of Madhyam. And what is Madhyam? Prema, Maitri, Kripa, Upeksha. They come where the nature of seeing four divisions of jivas are present. One, they see that themselves, they see their relationship of praying with Bhagavan. They see other Vaishnavas and other sadhus as Maitri, friendship, according to Adhikar. Then they also see those who are innocent. Ishwaretara Dineshu, Balishu. Balishu means those who are innocent. They're not developed in bhakti or spiritual life. Those ones who are innocents, they show kripa to them, mercy to them. So this kripa is the Prasad, Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhakti Lata Bij. Poi, I'm sorry. Guru Krishna Prasade Poi Bhakti Lata Bij. Right? This is the mercy. This is the kripa. Right? They show kripa to those persons, and to those persons who are envious, blasphemous, aparadi, etc., they may do upeksha, means neglect. Right? So this is the means under which bhakti is distributed in the world. You understand? When that bhakti is made available to any jiva by the good fortune, right, Yadrichaya or Konya Bhagwan, at that time the sojourn of the jiva in the material world comes to a conclusion. Of course, it doesn't come necessarily to an automatic stop, but Srila Prabhupada once gave the example, Srila Prabhupada, of unplugging a fan. Once the fan is unplugged, the power source that creates the revolution of the blades is gone, so now the blades don't stop instantaneously. Right? We're talking about old-fashioned fans, right? But rather, in a gradual decrease, the blades start to slow down, and eventually, not having that power source, they eventually come to a stop. Right? And also, a further expansion of that same analogy is that the fan blades, while it's plugged in, are extremely dangerous. If you put your hand in, and there are metal blades, even plastic blades, can give severe damage to the hand. But as the blades start to slow down, they come to a point gradually where their revolutions, right, are very minimal because there's no power behind them. So as you put here I am guilty, right? As a child, I would do that sometime, unplug the fan, and as the fan slowed down really a lot, you put your finger in there so you can like stop it with your finger, right? All right, don't judge me. All right, anyway, so the point being now with the power not available to empower those blades to be dangerous, they start to become weaker and weaker. You understand? In the same way, as the process of bhakti beginning with Shraddha starts to take place, and then sadhu sangha, and under the anugatya of sadhus, bhajana kriya starts to take place, then the spinning of those fans, which are full of anarthas, anartha nivritti, by the influence of the sadhu's guidance in bhajan, those anarthas start to dissipate. Understand? In the same way as the fan slowing down. So the influence of the modes of nature become less and less and less. Eventually, after the stage of anartha nivritti, nischalaya yashaha iti nishta. Then nishta will come. Nishta in bhajan means that now the chitta, which was formerly disturbed by so many influences of material energy coming and going from so many material impressions in our karmic package, right, starts to become extremely minimized. And now there's some placidness, some clarity to the chitta. At that time, tattad baba adi madire shuti dirapekshate nasa sasana yukingscha tal lobat utpati lakshanam. At that time, then the sweetness produced from bhajan becomes prominent in the heart or the chitta of the jiva. And the jiva begins to think, oh, I have so much taste for doing bhajan life, chanting Harinam, hearing Harikatha, doing Thakurji Seva, Vaishnav Seva. Because now, as it's expressed in Bhagavad Gita, Raso Rajam Rasopriyasha Param Drishanvartate. So now this taste has come. But the first part of that taste is in bhajan. Right? Not fully the object of the bhajan, but in bhajan itself. But then as it matures, Prodha Paratma, Sa'ayati Bhajaniyam. Then, Madhurya Kandamini says, it becomes more mature, that ruchi, that taste, and it becomes ruchi or taste in the object of the bhajan or bhajaniyam. That stage is called Ashakti. Understand? And then from Ashakti, it only awaits the descent of Swarup Shakti, means Aladini and Sambit Shakti, right? Onto the purified heart, which is Sandini Shakti at that point. When it descends onto the purified heart, it reveals Avyabhuyat Manobreto Vrajante Swarupatam, right? Swayam Prakasha Rupopi Basaman Prakashava. It will reveal very clearly, this is Sri Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this verse, it reveals the very nature of the Seva Abhista Tat Upayogi Dehina, means the desired mood in which you wanted to serve. That mood has been cultivated over lifetimes of impressions in bhakti, right? So that mood is then in the stage of a Sakti. It's described also by Jiva Goswami. Tasya tadrusa sudakaraka basa samalasi tadidois bhakti kamani. Tasya tadrusa ragatmakaya bhakti paribhaktisu api ruchi jayate. It's described by Jiva Goswami that in the stage of a Sakti, the actual abhas means like a reflection of the mood of one of the eternal associates reflects on the chitta. And the jiva's absorption in that mode of service, right, which has been cultivated by the sambandha gyan given by Guru at the time of Diksha, has now become mature. And so now the intensity, ashakti, right, a do-or-die mood, I want to serve Krishna like this. Giving rise to statements like in Vilap Kushmanjali, Shakayate mama namostu namostu nityam, Dashayate mama rasostu rasostu satyam. Raghunath Das Goswami saying, oh, I never want to have the mood of your Sakhi. Only I want to have the mood of your Palyadasi. In the stage of a Shakti, that becomes clear in the Chitta. And now it's only awaiting that when Swarup Shakti descends, it will reveal a form which you will realize that is suitable to accommodate that mode of service. Then after giving up this body, that same realized form becomes vastu, it becomes substance in anywhere Krishna is performing his prakat lila. And in that stage, one will have the association of the eternal associates in that particular mood, and their praying will grow through stages, praying, snehaman, etc., etc. So my point here was to understand the difference between ontology and history, and that our acharyas in many cases have used ontological descriptions in order to communicate a particular theological concept in Vaishnavism. Now, some people have taken those ontological presentations as historical and tried to find ways to connect and rationalize them. But then we have from Srimad Bhagavatam, and also 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse number 20, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Sa'artha Varsini, not Sa'artha Darshini, which is Bhagavatam, but Sa'artha Varsini Tika, commentary on Bhagavad Gita, he clearly says this asks and answers the question as to when the jivas became associated with Maya. Right? So he describes there that the Prakriti and the Atma have a anadi connection, same as in the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? Now, of course, I'm going to finish with one last thing, and that's that 16th chapter of Jiva Dharma, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur clearly says, don't be upset by this. Because in the long run, if you're claiming you want to serve Krishna, anya abhilasita sunyam, jnana kamari navatam anukulyena Krishna anusilanam, that all my endeavors are only to please Krishna. And if Krishna performs Srishti Leela, in which he comes himself, and performs so many pastimes, in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam is also written there, anugrahaya bhaktanam manushinam dehinam astita. Right? That when Krishna comes to give, anugraha means mercy, by his sweet leelas to all of his devotees, manushinam dehinam astita. Bhajate tat secret vash, yat shutva tat parobhavet. He says it's important, imperative. Bhavet is like an imperative in Sanskrit. You must do this. He says, so therefore you must hear about these pastimes that Krishna performed when he came here. That will give bhakti to the jivas. So the sweetness of the jivas having been separated by their ignorance in their revelation or in their unfoldment of realizing now love for Krishna, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, so what is the problem? Then he goes on to describe how even the eternal associates of Bhagavan appear to undergo some kind of suffering in the nature of their service to Bhagavan. I've told this before, so I don't want to really repeat it, but it's worthwhile. You cannot compare your bad day at the office to what the Pandavas suffered. There's no comparison to your separation from the broken heart of any girlfriend or boyfriend to what the gopis experience in the separation from Krishna when he leaves Vrindavan and they see him again only at Kurukshetra. Therefore, we should try to understand if even the eternal associates, they undergo some degree of suffering, but that suffering doesn't produce misery. It is a feature of Ananda. Now, some people have asked, I've had the question asked before, wait, the gopis are experiencing Ananda, but they're suffering greatly even up to the point of one Sanchari Baba is called Mriti. It means that all these symptoms of death are present, but you don't die, right? So if you read any grantha like Hangsa Dutta, Rup Goswami Pad, all these descriptions are there. Of course, they're also in Ujjwal Nilamani, right? But the point being, well, how do you understand that being ecstasy or ananda? You can't, because we've not had that experience. And you cannot understand what is aprakrit, means what is transcendental by any material facility. You understand? Just like I remember once there was a whole discussion, and this is why reading Geet Govind and other kinds of sastra like that is very important to do under guidance. Because someone was trying to understand the nature of the Kam Krida, it's called, or Samprayog, means like the relation of Radha and Krishna. How to understand that? Is it like purified sex life? No, it's not. It is strictly transformations of praying. And without having even nishta, how will we begin to digest what is the transformations of praying as an experience? We can't. You understand? And therefore we offer our Dandavat Pranam deeply to the aspiration to come to that mood. But we cannot make an intellectual transforming of that transcendental reality into the material world. So we can't understand how the gopis' deep suffering, their expressions in Gopi Geet, their expressions in Brahmar Geet, right? In Rudha Bhav and Adi Rudh Bhav. You can't, because that experience is not in the jiva, right? Then we can't understand the experiential reality of it. And we don't want to conjecture or speculate as to how it becomes ecstasy, even though it's misery and all these things, right? All right. All right, so hopefully I answered Prabhuji's question. And if not, then always, Prabhuji, you can write me again. You know who you are. You know, I never mention names on these things. And then we can unpack it a little bit further, but we may not have to do it in this format. All right, my Dandavat Pranam devotees. Panchakalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhueva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.